I was taken aback by the unexpected news that Thomas, my friend, sold the house I inherited from my dad for $450,000. The revelation came with an oddly cheerful tone as he shared it over the phone from the hospital. To add to the surprise, he boldly announced that he's planning to embark on a trip with his mistress. The whole situation struck me as sheer madness, leaving me bewildered. I couldn't fathom why Thomas would sell the house with sentimental value and make such an announcement. The news about abandoning his family, including his daughter Elizabeth, was particularly shocking. Thomas expressed a nonchalant attitude towards leaving Elizabeth behind, stating that she had been getting on his nerves and acting high and mighty. His callous remarks about his own child enraged me. As I processed the shocking news of Thomas selling the house and abandoning his family for his mistress, a mix of anger and shock overwhelmed me. It felt like I might lose my mind. I felt a strong urge to intervene and prevent Thomas from hastily disposing of the house. My name is Lisa Johnson, a 37.5-year-old homemaker. Life with my husband Thomas and our 8-year-old daughter Elizabeth has been far from harmonious. Marital discord has been escalating for a while, with suspicions of Thomas's infidelity lingering for about a year. Despite lacking concrete proof, his behavior, such as frequenting bars after work, returning with a peculiar sense, and gifting expensive items not meant for me, raised concerns. I've been too afraid to confront him about his potential affair, unable to take any decisive action. Reflecting on our relationship, I recall the Thomas I fell in love with a decade ago. His kindness and sincerity initially drew me in, and our marriage seemed blissful. However, things took a turn for the worse around the time our daughter Elizabeth turned 1. Parenting became more challenging, and as a full-time homemaker, I sought Thomas's assistance with tasks like baths and meals. Yet his behavior and frequent outings began to change, leaving me bewildered about how our once happy marriage ended up in this tumultuous state. In the beginning, Thomas, perhaps aware of his role as a father, initially assisted with childcare as I requested. However, as it became a daily routine, he gradually developed resentment and stopped actively participating in parenting. He started expressing sentiments like, "This is your job as a stay-at-home mom. You should handle parenting on your own. What does a tired man like me have to help out after work?" Thomas's complaints were intense, leaving me and Elizabeth alone in the living room while he retreated to the bedroom. Dealing with Elizabeth's tantrums and struggling through the evening routine alone, Thomas's harsh words lingered painfully. His withdrawal from interacting with Elizabeth became more pronounced, even on his days off. When Elizabeth asked him to play, he responded dismissively, saying, "Playing is your mom's job. I'm busy." Thomas didn't consider Elizabeth's feelings, scolding her if she cried and blaming my parenting skills. To shield Elizabeth from his verbal abuse, we often retreated to our room and played together, just the two of us. There were times when I yearned for personal hobbies like reading or watching movies. However, living with Elizabeth around the clock left little time for myself, while Thomas indulged in his horse racing hobby. The situation felt unfair, but I couldn't complain as our household relied on Thomas's income. I felt a sense of helplessness and frustration as I found myself unable to change the circumstances that had persisted for 8 long years. Thomas's disinterest in parenting and his abusive language became a distressing pattern, a far cry from the caring and kind Thomas I knew before our marriage. Despite enduring this situation, I knew it was essential to provide for Elizabeth, and Thomas's income was crucial for our survival. One day, while drawing together, Elizabeth complimented my artistic skills and suggested that I pursue drawing as a job. Despite Thomas's contemptuous nature, Elizabeth had grown up to be honest, straightforward, and cheerful, the opposite of my more introverted personality. It was heartening to see her thriving at school, surrounded by friends, and even earning the favor of her teacher. Elizabeth's compliments about my drawings filled me with pride and confidence, reminding me that she paid attention to me and appreciated my efforts. I was grateful for her positivity, which brought joy to our challenging family dynamics. As long as Elizabeth could smile, I felt a sense of resilience in facing the challenges of our life. That quiet realization echoed in my thoughts that night. However, our household situation took a familiar turn when Thomas, in his usual inebriated state, stumbled home and collapsed into the living room. His drinking habits had escalated lately, becoming a source of increasing concern. Sighing, I began the routine of peeling his jacket off his slumped body. In the process, a piece of paper fell from a pocket that typically housed only keys. Upon closer scrutiny, it revealed itself as a receipt from a motel. Unmistakable evidence confirming the suspicions I had only held vaguely until then. In an attempt to conceal the turmoil within me, I quietly stashed the receipt away on a shelf as the night unfolded. I contemplated how to address this revelation with Thomas. The next morning, with Thomas not yet fully sober, he left the house after Elizabeth had gone to school. Engrossed in my regular household tasks, I found it impossible to shake off the lingering thoughts of the previous day's revelation. Having suspected Thomas's infidelity without concrete evidence, the receipt presented a dilemma. It became challenging to ignore the truth and maintain the facade of a masked couple. I felt compelled to confront him, seek an admission, and perhaps an apology within the upcoming week or even days. Lost in contemplation, my smartphone interrupted my thoughts with an unexpected vibration. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen, triggering a sense of apprehension as I answered the call. The caller identified themselves as someone from General Hospital delivering news about Thomas. He had been rushed to the hospital by ambulance and was undergoing surgery for a kidney disease. The doctor explained that Thomas's kidneys were likely to fail, necessitating a transplant. Overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, the doctor asked if I was all right. Despite the complex emotions, I found myself agreeing. As the doctor elaborated on the details of the transplant surgery, my mind swirled with confusion. Although Thomas had often mocked me and been unfaithful, I didn't wish for him to lose his life. That night, I held on to the hope for Thomas's recovery. My thoughts centered around his impending transplant surgery. As weeks passed, news about potential kidney transplant candidates within the family emerged. Surprisingly, I turned out to be the best match. The revelation that I was a compatible donor for Thomas, despite the challenges in our relationship, presented an unexpected twist in our story. The situation became more complex with the presence of Thomas's parents, who were still alive. The impending decision about organ donation required careful consideration, blending the threads of our troubled history with the possibility of a renewed connection through the transplant process. Despite my own less than perfect health, I emerged as the most suitable donor for Thomas's kidney transplant due to our matching blood types and the fact that he was an only child. Admittedly, I had reservations about undergoing the surgery, but the prospect of preserving Thomas's life overshadowed any hesitations. Recognizing the irreplaceable value of Thomas's existence, I made the difficult decision to be his kidney donor. When I shared Thomas's medical condition and our upcoming transplant surgery with Elizabeth, she responded with understanding and encouragement, sending me off with her blessing. Elizabeth stayed with my in-laws during my hospitalization, and despite their own health challenges, they were able to care for Elizabeth, who happily stayed with them, sharing a close bond with her grandparents. This arrangement provided me with a sense of relief, knowing that Elizabeth was in good hands. With that reassurance, I faced the kidney transplant surgery a week later. After completing the necessary health checks and signing consent forms, I donated my kidney to Thomas. The surgery, to my surprise, concluded more swiftly than anticipated. I spent approximately a week in the hospital, while Thomas's recovery extended to 10 days. Fortunately, there were no complications, and the recovery process proceeded smoothly. Just before my scheduled discharge, I received an unexpected call that sent a shiver down my spine. Answering the phone, I was met with Thomas's voice, the recipient of my kidney. Expecting words of gratitude for the life-saving donation, I inquired about his well-being after the surgery. However, Thomas' response took an unforeseen turn as he shifted the conversation to our house. In an inappropriately cheerful tone, He disclosed that he had sold our house for $450,000 and intended to embark on a trip with his mistress. The news struck me like a bolt of lightning, and I couldn't comprehend the audacity of his actions. The house, a precious inheritance from my father, was being callously disposed of, and Thomas's brazen declaration of having a mistress added another layer of shock in the midst of my disbelief. I confronted him about Elizabeth's well-being, only to be met with indifference. Thomas callously dismissed any concerns for our daughter, stating that he didn't care and was leaving her behind. The revelation left me enraged and appalled. The thought of him selling the house and abandoning his own daughter was beyond comprehension. Determined to intervene, I realized that I needed to stop Thomas from hastily relinquishing the house. As the call abruptly ended, my mind swirled with turmoil. I was left grappling with the shocking news of Thomas's actions and contemplating how to prevent him from following through with his impulsive decisions. The urgency to protect our home and Elizabeth's well-being became a pressing matter that demanded immediate attention. Trying to comprehend the sudden upheaval caused by Thomas's actions, I found myself unable to believe that he had sold our house, especially while he was in the hospital. The shock of this revelation worsened my condition, leading to an extension of my hospital stay. Feeling helpless and distressed, I spent days on the hospital bed contemplating the next steps. My first instinct was to call Elizabeth. Without the house, we would have nowhere to go. Despite my anger towards Thomas's bold declaration about his mistress, my primary concern was Elizabeth's well-being. Calling my in-laws home, Elizabeth answered the phone, and I anxiously questioned her about how she was doing and whether she felt lonely. I also mentioned the news about our house being sold by Dad. Elizabeth's response was unexpectedly reassuring. She calmly assured me that she had taken care of things. Intrigued and puzzled by her words, I listened as she explained that Dad had told her he asked his mistress to sell the house. Elizabeth had navigated through this unexpected turn of events, leaving me surprised and proud of her maturity. She reassured me that everything was fine, expressing gratitude for my concern. Encouraged by Elizabeth's composure, I allowed a bit of peace to settle in. However, curiosity lingered about what was happening with Thomas and his mistress at that very moment. Reminding myself of the importance of rest, I allowed sleep to claim me. After 3 days of recovery, I was discharged from the hospital and headed to my in-laws' house. Elizabeth greeted me with joy, and my mother-in-law smiled gently, expressing happiness at my return. However, my father-in-law wore a grim expression, apologizing for Thomas's actions. I couldn't fathom how Thomas had strayed so far from the values of his wonderful parents. Despite the apology, I took some responsibility, acknowledging that perhaps I should have spoken up sooner. As the conversation progressed, my in-laws revealed that they wouldn't let Thomas have his way. Intrigued and somewhat anxious, Elizabeth and I attempted to head home. On our way, though, we encountered an unexpected scene in front of a realtor's office. There, we witnessed a familiar yet disheveled Thomas and an unknown woman, presumably his mistress, engaged in a heated argument. Dressed in sweatpants with unkempt hair, Thomas was visibly distressed, while the mistress, wearing a short skirt with a single high heel and a bare face, expressed frustration about the house not being sold and the canceled purchase of $450,000. The chaotic scene unfolded before us, adding another layer of complexity to an already tumultuous situation. Thomas's enraged stomping and his mistress's screeching drew shocked looks from passersby. Elizabeth and I, equally surprised, approached them, seeking an explanation. Upon questioning Thomas about his actions, he and his mistress were visibly taken aback, gasping in surprise. Accusations were immediately thrown our way, with Thomas suggesting that I must have talked the buyer out of the deal. Dismissing their baseless claims and instinctively shielding Elizabeth behind me, I faced their accusations. The realtor, confused by the unfolding drama, reacted with disbelief upon learning that I was Thomas's wife. The cancellation of the house purchase had disrupted their plans, and Thomas, pointing at his mistress, claimed to still have debts from the money he spent on her. It slowly dawned on me that Thomas' intention was to sell the house to settle debts incurred for his mistress and secure a new place for both of them. The realization hit me like a wave. Thomas was fully aware that the house was a precious inheritance from my father. To think he would disregard Elizabeth and me, attempting to seize my most valuable asset, was beyond belief. Anger welled up within me as I confronted Thomas. Despite the critical situation, he continued to hurl insults, displaying a complete lack of decency. I pointed out the audacity of him trying to sell my house without discussion, emphasizing that I was the rightful owner. My anger intensified as I questioned whether he had forged documents to proceed with the sale. Furthermore, I revealed the surprising twist. Thomas had been bad-mouthing the supposed buyers of the house, unaware that they were his own parents. The revelation about my in-laws' involvement came from Elizabeth, who had spoken to them about Thomas's misdeeds. Infuriated by their son's actions, my in-laws decided to intervene to protect both Lisa and their good-hearted granddaughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth stepped forward confidently, explaining that her grandparents were well aware of the house's significance to me and disapproved of its easy sale. In a strategic move, they had pretended to buy the house before anyone else could. Thomas, desperate and defeated, unleashed a vulgar laugh and lashed out at Elizabeth and her grandparents. However, Elizabeth remained unfazed by his verbal assault, and in response, I retrieved a piece of paper from my bag and thrust it under Thomas's nose, ready to confront him with undeniable evidence. The unfolding drama showcased the complexities of family dynamics and the lengths one would go to protect the ones they love. Brandishing the divorce papers, I confronted Thomas with a resolute declaration, I want a divorce. However, instead of acknowledging the gravity of the situation, Thomas snorted and scoffed, questioning my ability to live without him. Unfazed by his arrogance, I decided it was time to dispel his misguided assumptions. Determined to shatter Thomas's illusions, I calmly informed him that I had a plan. You needn't worry. I'm going to receive a lifetime gift from your parents, I declared. The mention of a lifetime gift left Thomas and his mistress bewildered. I went on to explain that my in-laws, recognizing their declining health, wished to give me a portion of their assets before it was too late. Initially, I suggested that such a gift should go to Thomas. However, my in-laws insisted that I, as the one who had given them a lovely granddaughter, were more important to them than a son who couldn't even express gratitude for a life-saving organ donation. Grateful for their generosity, I accepted the lifetime gift, leaving Thomas pale and agitated. Outraged by the turn of events, Thomas protested, calling it dirty and unjust. He threatened to take the matter to court, but I calmly reminded him that it was his fault for spending all that money, and his parents had made a justified decision. Dismissing his threats, I questioned whether he even had the financial means to go to court, highlighting the consequences of his past betrayals. Closing the distance to Thomas and delivering the final blow, I made it clear that every penny of compensation for emotional distress and child support would be sought. Unleashing a stern warning, I stated that if he couldn't pay, I would chase him to the ends of the earth to collect. Thomas, desperate and shaken, begged for forgiveness, but it was too late. Glaring at him with unwavering determination, I declared that I would pursue every avenue to hold him accountable for insulting Elizabeth and me. As Thomas and his mistress screamed and ran away, the realtor who had witnessed the entire confrontation expressed gratitude for the resolution. Acknowledging the awkwardness of the situation, I apologized for any trouble caused, ready to move forward with the next chapter of my life. Taking Elizabeth's hand, we headed home, and she expressed gratitude for standing up for her. A smile adorned Elizabeth's face, and in that moment, I made a silent vow to protect her for the rest of our lives. The divorce from Thomas unfolded without any significant issues, marking the end of a long-suffering marriage. Surprisingly, it was almost anticlimactic, prompting me to reflect on why I had endured everything until now. It became apparent that Thomas had invested a considerable amount of money into his affair and had resorted to borrowing funds from various sources. His mistress eventually left him, citing an inability to be with such a financially troubled man. Misfortunes seemed to converge for Thomas as his company had to cut back on staff due to a decrease in sales caused by material shortages. Working in the factory, Thomas was among the first to be laid off. While it may be inconvenient for him, it's challenging to believe he was laid off for no reason. It's likely that the company let go of those who underperformed or had poor conduct, which might have been the case for Thomas, given his demeanor at home. Now unemployed, he is scraping by with part-time jobs, lacking the energy to actively search for a new full-time position. His life seems bleak, having lost his job, lover, and wife. But there's little room for sympathy. Despite my efforts, including donating a part of my kidney to him, Thomas made a mockery of me. It appears that karma has caught up with him, and he should focus on working hard to pay off his debt. As for me, I've started doing illustration work, utilizing the assets I inherited from my in-laws. Initially inspired by Elizabeth's compliment about my drawing skills, I have received positive feedback from clients who appreciate the meticulous and skillful nature of my work. The plan is to increase my clientele and work diligently to provide a better life for Elizabeth.